It's a Mailbag Friday on the podcast, and a lot of questions are asking about 2025. Are we already giving up on 2024? We'll talk about that. Other questions have to do with the coaching staff as well as the offensive struggles. More questions on Chipper's comments about the offense. We'll discuss all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop of All. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves. Subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're new, hit that thumbs up button so others can find us, and leave me a comment down below, especially if you're an everydayer and if you make Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. I appreciate you letting me know that in the comments section on YouTube. If you listen on the audio version, you can go on over to YouTube and do that as well, but I'd also appreciate you leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Braves is brought to you by PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Well, we have made it to the end of the week, and it is a mailbag episode of the Locked On Braves. So I got over 20 questions to get to. I think the final tally was 24 questions to answer on today's show. As typical, it's going to be a wide range of questions, but several of them dealing with 2025, what the rotation will look like, what the lineup will look like, some on the coaching staff, some on the offensive struggles. So as usual, it's going to be a wide variety of questions. So just hang in there with me, and I'm going to go through them in order of the way that I see them on social media. First one comes from Our Theme to Life, who says, Chipper pretty much summed up this Braves 2024 offense recently. He hit the nail on the head, in my opinion. Do you think the offense has truly regressed from a talent standpoint, or is it more of Seitzer's hitting approach with these guys or lack thereof? Love the show. We talked about this earlier in the week. You want to go back and give that a listen on Chipper's comments. Look, in an ideal world, in a perfect world, you would have a lineup that can do everything. You would have a lineup up and down that can hit for power, can put the ball in play, can do the little things. That is a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world. That just doesn't happen. Ideally, you want players who are well-rounded to do all of those things. Whenever I talk about this and I talk about what an ideal offense looks like, I go back to those early Astros teams, and I can't say it as much anymore because those teams may or may not have been cheating. But when I look at those teams, I look at a lineup up and down that put the ball in play, didn't strike out a lot, and just about everybody in that lineup could hit 20-plus home runs. And I think that's where you have to find a little bit of compromise in your lineup. And I'm going to get to this question, but this is just kind of more of a broader point on how I view an ideal offense. I would rather have guys that will hit 270, 280 with between 20 to 30 home runs than guys who will hit 240 to 260 with 30-plus home runs. That's me. Again, I would love for guys who can do both. It's very rare. Very rarely are you going to get guys who hit 30-plus home runs and are going to hit 280 or higher. You've seen it, obviously, this year with Ozuna, saw with Riley last year. Matt Olson was right there in the 270 range. But that's ideal. Those are the ideal types of players that you can get up and down your lineup. And the guys I'm talking about, those are middle, top of the order type of bats. But I'm talking about just a lineup top to bottom. If you could have a lineup full of guys that can hit 270, 280, and can hit 20-plus home runs, that's the ideal scenario. So there has to be a little bit of both. So I agree with Chipper in that regard. But as we talked about on the podcast the other day, home runs are the way to score. And I gave you the facts. In that podcast. Teams that lead the league in runs scored, they also lead the league in home runs. It's the most efficient way to score runs. I don't know how much more plainly you can say that. Now, the question from Our Theme Life, do you think the Braves offense has truly regressed from a talent standpoint? Yes, it has truly regressed from a talent standpoint when you take out a Ron Acuna Jr., when you take out an Austin Riley, an Ozzie Albies, a Michael Harris, a Sean Murphy for significant parts of the season, you have lost all of those guys for at least 2 months of the season. So you are taking a significant regression in terms of talent when you're trying to fill gaps with a Luke Williams, a Gio Urshela, even an Adam Duvall. You are taking a step back talent-wise. Second part of that question, do you think it's more of Seitzer's hitting approach with these guys or lack thereof? What I don't understand, we know the team philosophy, and as Chipper pointed out, this is top down. This starts at the top with Alex Anthopoulos. This is the team's philosophy on hitting is slug, slug, slug. That's just the team philosophy, and that is the philosophy of a lot of teams. It is not just the Braves. The majority of Major League Baseball teams are going after that. Launch angle, slug, swinging for the fence. That's the goal of just about every offense in baseball. What I don't understand, and again, there is a talent regression with all the injuries, but last year, it felt like the guys had more of a game plan going up to the plate than they do this year. And it's tough to see, and it's tough to understand with even the guys who have been here, like an Acuna, who is off to a slow start, which I think is partly due to, I think he was still hurting on that knee a little bit from tweaking it in spring training. Offense was also held back at the beginning of the year. That's a fact across Major League Baseball. There's numbers to prove it. But it was just the strikeout rate had gone back up. And the strikeout rate had gone up for a lot of hitters in this Braves lineup. And that is something I don't quite understand from year to year and the hitting approach for those guys. So it's both. And I know that's kind of just sitting on the fence and not giving you a straight answer, but it is a regression of talent because of the injuries. And it is also a lack of better game planning and approach from the hitters just overall, even the guys who are healthy that were here last year, which is basically just Ozuna and Olsen, who are guys that are going to strike out and guys that are going to swing and miss a lot. That's just in their game. And so you're missing those more well-rounded players like Acuna, like an Austin Riley, like an Ozzie Albies, and Michael Harris. He should be one of those more well-rounded players, and he just hasn't been that this year, and he's dealt with his own injuries. So again, I know that's not necessarily putting my foot down and giving you an answer one way or the other, but I do think that is the answer. I think it's a little bit of both. You've lost some talent. It's also has not been great approaches at the plate, and there has not been an adjustment to that approach that I can see. And this is my argument the other day is with all the injuries, the Braves are still trying to build a team on an identity that no longer exists. You have everybody healthy. You go with that identity of slug. Those guys aren't healthy, and you're still trying to build an identity on slug. And the guys that you have just aren't capable of that. And the team has failed to change their approach to what you have. I've spent a lot of time on that, but again, I think it's a worthwhile topic. Next one from Mike says, as a new baseball fan, can you rank each position in terms of significance? I've heard you mention shortstop and catcher as the two most important. I'm curious how they all stack up. So talking about positions on the field, everybody talks about you want to be strong up the middle, and that's catcher, shortstop, center field. Those are your most important positions on the field defensively. You want to be strong defensively in those three spots in particular, and the Braves are. They are very strong, obviously, with Sean Murphy back there, one of the best defensive catchers in the league. Michael Harris, one of the best center fielders in the league, and Arcia is very solid at shortstop. You can get away with, lesser position at second base. You really need to have a good first baseman because you got to do some different things over there. But up the middle, those are your primary positions in the field. You want to be very solid up the middle. And so those are the positions I think are most important. Dustin Mounts, who do you think should take the fifth starter spot for the next time needed? Anderson's, Shawver, Waldrop, Holmes, or someone else? And do you think the Braves should give the others time in the bullpen, minors or majors, in case the Braves make the playoffs? So I think Ian Anderson's going to get the next opportunity when needed, which I think is going to be the Tuesday game in Cincinnati. And that would kind of line up. It'd be a week after Ian Anderson last pitched. So I do think he's going to get that chance when it is needed. And I do think that you try out AJ Smith-Shawver in the bullpen, when the AAA season is over. And I think there's some names down there that you can certainly take out to put in an AJ Smith-Shawver and just let him work in the bullpen in case you do get to the postseason and he becomes a weapon there. So I am certainly in favor of that. That was only 3 of our 24 questions to get to. Obviously, got a lot more to cover on today's mailbag episode. We'll get back into those questions here next. For those of us who thrive on getting stuff done, including workouts, every minute counts. That's why you need Tonal, the smart strength training system that takes the guesswork out of working out so you can make sure you're making the most of every rep. When life gets busy, fitting in a workout can be stressful. With Tonal, you can get an efficient workout personalized just for you and are available with the amount of time that you have. Tonal is the world's smartest and most effective strength training system that helps you get stronger. Powered by AI, Tonal learns with every rep so it can deliver personalized workouts. Right now, Tonal is offering our listeners $200 off your Tonal purchase with promo code LockedOnMLB. That's Tonal.com and use promo code LockedOnMLB for $200 off your purchase. That's Tonal.com, promo code LockedOnMLB for $200 off. Thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go make your second listen to the Locked On MLB podcast, where solely is recapping everything happening around Major League Baseball and setting you up for the postseason. This will be our last Locked On Braves podcast of the week, unless we have a bonus episode, which we did last week, so it is possible. But otherwise, we'll be back next week, capping everything happening over the weekend, the series with the Dodgers, the first 3 games in that series. It'll be a Sunday night baseball game there, and also what's happening at the minor league level, the AA, AAA season's coming to an end in Rome in the postseason. We'll discuss that on Monday's episode. Well, let's jump back into our questions because we got a lot more to get to. Burn Looney says, what do you believe Jarred Kelenick's future with this team is? Do you think the Braves will keep him in the starting lineup with the hopes he can get back that early to mid-season fire, or do you think he is just not worth the cold periods? We've talked about this as well. If everything stays the same and you come back next year with the roster that you have, I think there's a good chance that Jarred Kelenick starts next year in AAA. And that's not, to me, giving up on Jarred Kelenick. That, to me, is sending Jarred Kelenick to his place where he can play every day in hopes that he can reach that potential and that he can get in there and be an everyday outfielder. Because let's assume that everybody is healthy going into next year, that Acuna's ready. You still have Soler on this roster, and obviously you're going to have Michael Harris. Those 3 are going to play in the outfield. They're going to be your starting outfielders with Ozuna at DH, because I think the Braves they'd be stupid not to pick up that option. So that is going to be your outfield. And I don't want Jarred Kelenick just sitting on the bench if I believe that there is something there for him to unlock. So I think there's a real possibility that Jarred Kelenick starts next year at AAA, unless Acuna's not ready and you want to give him more time, which I think is very possible. And what I think the Braves probably should do is slow play Acuna coming back next year, not let him rush back into things like he admitted that he did the first time that he tore his ACL or his other ACL. So I think, there is a chance that if that is the case, that Kelenick starts the year in the big leagues. But I think at some point, if everybody's healthy, you're going to see Kelenick go down to AAA and continue to develop in hopes of unlocking him. I don't think the Braves are just going to get rid of him, and there's really no reason to. He's not owed a lot of money, and we've seen some flashes here and there. Got to work on that strikeout rate. We've talked about the strikeouts in this lineup and how it's killing this team. You can't have a 30% strikeout rate. That has to be improved. Even if it's just down to 25%, that has to improve. Can you play him against lefties? Again, is he an everyday outfielder? Those are still questions that need to be answered, and Jarred Kelenick needs everyday playing time to prove that or disprove that, however you want to look at it. And so if there is not an everyday spot for him to begin next season, he has a minor league option left. I think the best path would be to send him down, let him continue to work on those things so that when an opportunity does come up, because it will at some point, and he gets another shot, hopefully he runs with it. But I just didn't see enough from him this year. And I know there's 2.5, 3 weeks left, whatever. But I just did not see enough from him this season to say that is my outfielder of the future. Maybe you disagree. Let me know. I'm certainly hoping for the best, rooting for the kid. I just did not see that this season. Jason Flake, do you agree with them calling up Biggio over Williams? I felt like Williams was starting to get comfortable at the plate, and now we started over with the same type of player. And that was my initial thought. I'll be honest. When they signed Kevin Biggio and then called him up, I said, is this even any better of a move? I think at best it's a lateral move. Now, I talked about this the other day when they called him up. I think Kevin Biggio is a guy that has more major league experience. And the one thing that he has done well in the majors is get on base. He's had a 10% or higher walk rate every year in the big leagues, and he has good sprint speed. So it does give you a guy who, while he's not going to hit for power, he's not going to hit for average, it's a guy that typically can get on base. And that's something that this lineup desperately needs. And he has some speed. Luke Williams had some speed as well. So again, it does feel like you're just inserting a guy with a different name, but the same skill set, low batting average, get on base, has some speed. So yeah, that was my initial thought too, is it just feels like a lateral move, but you're just getting somebody with a little bit more track record at the big league level. Joey Milby, Trump and Baldwin have destroyed AAA pitching. Murphy has been injured and struggled this year, but has a long-term deal. And d'Arnaud is the veteran leader of the Braves. Who's all on the roster next year, and what is their role? A lot of fans aren't going to like this, especially I just saw somebody in the chat say that Sean Murphy stinks. Charlie Dunn saying Sean Murphy is horrendous. That was even worse than stinks. It's going to be Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud, in my opinion. Trump is great, and I hope that you can get him back in the system again, because he is a great third catcher. I don't know what the plan is with Drake Baldwin. I just don't get to watch him enough at AAA to know. I hear good things, that he's developed well as a catcher and can stick behind the plate. I just don't know that for myself. I haven't seen it for me to say one way or the other. But I think Drake Baldwin may be a DH long-term. I think that's a possibility, that maybe he becomes the DH after Ozuna is gone. Again, I have not been able to watch him enough myself to tell you if he can stick behind the plate. If he can, great. And then perhaps he does take over for Travis d'Arnaud at some point. But I think Travis is coming back for another season. And I think it'll be Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud again. And I think it's going to be Sean Murphy that gets the majority of the workload. That's my opinion right now. That could very well change in the offseason if Sean Murphy just all of a sudden gets traded, which I do not think is going to happen. Again, if you're asking me to guess right now and predict right now, I think it is going to be Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud back there again. And I think you're going to start to see Sean Murphy, if he can stay healthy, finally take over that starting catcher job. Obviously, if you listen to the podcast, I'm a big believer in Sean Murphy. So I think it's going to be his job next year, but I do think Travis d'Arnaud is going to be back again. E. Goldie says the starting rotation for 2025 is suddenly much better than we were projecting early this year. Strider, Sale, Lopez, and Schwelly are a great first four, maybe the best in Major League Baseball. Assuming Fried and Morton aren't back, do you think we have the fifth starter in our system right now? I do, and I think Ian Anderson could be a very solid fifth starter. I think AJ Smith-Shawver. I think there's going to be a multitude of guys that could be your fifth starter. I also think the Braves are going to go out and sign a veteran starting pitcher. Whether or not they bring back Max Fried and or Charlie Morton, which I think Charlie Morton's going to retire. I think Max Fried's going to sign somewhere else. I think they're going to go out and sign a veteran starter or two. Might not be the expensive variety, but we've seen over the past several years how much depth you need in the rotation. And you probably can't afford to go get two veteran starters because nobody's going to want to sign here if they're not guaranteed a spot. But I think you're going to go out and get at least one veteran starter this offseason to go with those four guys. Because look, while Sale and Lopez have been great this year and Schwellenbach was great, Schwellenbach's a rookie. What if the league, starts to adjust to him and, he's more of a four in your rotation instead of what looks like a 2 or 3 right now? What if Lopez, the shoulder thing becomes more? It's just, you never know with pitchers. It's year to year. You just never know. And you have to be able to prepare for the worst. So I don't think they'll go into the year with anybody currently on the team as their fifth starter. I think they'll go out and get somebody. But I do think there are plenty of candidates in the system right now. Drew Hackenberg, Lucas Braun are guys that could be ready next year. So I think there are plenty of options in the system, but I do think the Braves will go out and get somebody. All right, I'm going to have to move rather quickly here. Dustin Mounts, if the Braves make the playoffs with the other wildcard teams' schedules being rough or against each other, what is your opening wildcard round roster based on everything injury related that we all know currently? I mean, that's kind of hard to predict. I'm assuming Ozzy is going to be back, so Ozzy is going to be on the roster. And does it really matter at that point who's on your bench? I mean, I think AJ Smith-Shawver, Daysbel Hernandez are arms that could replace some of your last bullpen guys like a Luke Jackson, like a Jesse Chavez. I could not imagine going into a postseason series with those guys in my bullpen on my pitching staff. I'd much rather have some high upside arms like Daysbel and like AJ Smith-Shawver. So those are some possible replacements. I don't see anybody else at AAA that's going to take over any bench spots. And like I said, with Ozzy coming back, that probably knocks out, one of the outfielders, and Eli White probably gets the boot at that point because you got to get somebody that can play the infield like a Kevin Biggio. So I don't think it would be too much different than the roster that you have now. You can maybe play around with the pitching spots a little bit because you only need at most 3 starters. But I still think, obviously, I don't know that Lopez will be ready. Even if he is, I think you still carry all 5 starters just to have them in case, a starter does leave early or something like that. So I don't think the roster will be too much different. I think it'll just be adding Ozzy and subtracting Eli White. And I think it'll be adding a Daysbel Hernandez and an AJ Smith-Shawver, which I know Daysbel's on the roster now, with Lopez on the injured list, and replacing a Jesse Chavez and a Luke Williams. E-Goldie, you've talked a lot about how this team is built around slug and on-base percentage. What do you think A can do to help put more focus on base percentage approach this offseason? Coaching changes, or is it as simple as excusing everything this season because of injuries? I'm not of the belief you can excuse everything this year because of injuries. I do think more pressure has been put on these guys because of the injuries, and they've tried to go outside of themselves. I talked a lot on yesterday's podcast about Sean Murphy, a guy that will typically take his walks and will get on base, and you just saw him in a situation with runners on second and third where he feels that pressure to come through in that moment, and he went outside of himself to try to make something happen. And you've seen it with all hitters this year. A lot of Braves hitters, Olsen, Ozuna, have both done it multiple times this year. I think there has to be an approach change talked about this year where there's more of a 2-strike approach. I understand the desire to have slug and to get your A swing off every at bat, but it can't be every swing. It has to be situational. And I've been saying that for years, even when the offenses were great and hitting all those home runs. You can't, especially not with all the injuries that you've had. You can't do that in 2-strike situations. You can't do that when the situation calls for you to just hit a ball up the middle or to put a ball in the outfield. They have to have some sort of approach and discussion this offseason about how to handle those situations. And we'll see if they do, but I personally think that needs to take place. And whether that's a coaching change or not, that conversation and that philosophy needs to really be thought about and discussed this offseason, because it clearly has not been effective this year. And again, a lot of that's due to injuries and the guys that you have. But either way, there needs to be some sort of discussion, because it's not just in the regular season. What we've really seen the last 2 postseasons when you've had a healthy offense is that when they couldn't get those home runs against really good pitching, they failed to score. So not even just looking at this year and their inability to score in different ways, it's really the past 2 postseasons I think you can point to as well and say, when the home run ball is taken away from us, how else can we score runs? What other little things can we do to push a run or 2 across here or there? So not just for this season, but for the last 2 postseasons, I think you really have to take a long look at that approach and philosophy this offseason. All right, we got a lot more questions to get to, man. I don't know if I'm gonna get to all of these, but I appreciate you sending all these in. We'll try to run through as many as we can here next. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And you win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. And now, through the month of September, one Caleb Williams passing yard is going to get you a free win every weekend in September. That's 4 weeks of free wins. PrizePicks available in more than 30 states across the country, including Georgia and your great state of Alabama. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't have to win to get the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. First, talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's double your winnings for all of Sunday, 9:15 pregame moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday, 9/12. View your account page now to learn more about your boost. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. FanDuel, again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, I'm going to try to move quickly through some of these questions. We got a lot to get to. Caden Hurd says, Justin Mounts, with the weather forecast and rain until Tuesday, what will they do if they have to knock out some of these games? Unfortunately, you're going to have to make them up. There's a couple of days in between the end of the season and the wild card round, which I think needs to be shortened, that you're going to have to play these games. And that's going to stink for both teams because the Dodgers are going to be guaranteed a spot. They're not going to care about that game, which I guess could benefit the Braves ultimately because the Braves would be the ones that would need it. But that's really the only thing you can do at this point in the season. Caden Hurd, in terms of the future, would you rather sign Jack Flaherty or Willy Adames? Willy Adames is going to get the Dansby Swanson treatment this offseason, I believe. I think he's going to have, coming off a career year, he's going to get way more money than he probably should get. Could be the same for Jack Flaherty. I don't think the Braves sign either. I'd rather have Willy, I don't know. I think I'd rather have Willy Adames. I don't know. That's a tough call for me. I say that and I think about it. I don't know. I would love to have either one of those guys. I think both of them are going to get overpaid. But I do like the Willy Adames, at shortstop. I've always liked Willy Adames. Ricardo Ortiz, what do you think about the schedule for the Braves and Mets? Is it possible for the Braves to get to the postseason? It's possible. You're going to have to win several games against some good teams the rest of the way, including the Mets. But it's possible. Scott McIntyre, Lopez has been an awesome starting pitcher this year, but if the Braves get to the postseason, does it make sense to use Lopez out of the pen to protect his arm for next year? That is certainly a case, and we'll obviously have to see how Lopez, progresses throughout all of this, but that is a possibility. He obviously is familiar with that role and could play it well. So, yeah, you could certainly do that and go with, Sale, Fried, Morton, and/or Schwellenbach. Schwellenbach's a bit questionable for me right now. We got to see how he finishes down the stretch now, if he's getting a little bit tired. But you could do that, certainly in a wild card type series. Josh Williams, question 2, could it be simply a lack of heart? I feel like the Braves have an excuse for not winning, injuries. They just don't seem to want it. I don't know. Look, these guys want to win. I know it may not look like it on TV from what you see, but I can guarantee you these guys want to perform and they want to win. It is not a lack of care, effort, or heart. Kelnick's Boomstick, if you could get an autograph from and/or a photo with anyone on the Braves 2021 World Series team, who would it be and why? Didn't have to be on the playoff roster. So I guess you're kind of telling me there it can be Acuna. I would have said Dansby at the time because he was probably one of my favorite Braves players at that time. But since then, I've kind of soured on Dansby a little bit. I guess I'll probably go with Freddie Freeman would be the guy. Kathy Gold, does this team regularly use a sports psychologist? Being 100% serious here. I don't know, but I know a lot of teams do that. I know a lot of teams do have a sports psychologist or somebody that they talk to, but Braves could use whatever they can get at the moment. Duval Debater, do you feel like the hitting coach needs to be fired? Again, it's hard for me to say that when you're coming off the best offensive season we've ever seen, and not just for the Braves, historically. And so to all of a sudden say, let's fire the hitting coach, after a season in which you've lost so many players to injury, I feel like that's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Alan F. David Fletcher is making $6 million this season and next season. Is the MLB investigation the reason they aren't calling him up? Yes. I've said that multiple times now. I think he's just in purgatory down there. I don't think the Rays are going to do anything with him until that investigation is complete. And I don't know why it has taken so long. I feel like they settled the Ohtani and with his interpreter thing within a month. And here we are still into the season now, and David Fletcher's still here, and the Braves kind of just stuck with him. You don't want to cut him because then you're going to owe him all that money anyway. So you might as well wait till the investigation done, and they're not going to call him up because you don't want to call the guy that's probably about to get banned from baseball. Chris 1414, if Braves don't, and I don't want to make any judgments about David Fletcher. I don't have the full story, but I do think he is stuck down there because of that reason. With all the injuries you've had, there's no other reason why you wouldn't have given David Fletcher a shot at this point. Chris 1414, if the Braves don't make the postseason this year, with Truist Park hosting the All-Star game next season, would you expect significant changes to the roster for 2025? I don't. I really don't. And again, I know fans probably aren't going to want to hear that, but I think they're going to run it back next year with mostly the same group of guys. And I don't think the All-Star game or anything like that coming has anything really to do with that. I think they're going to take a long look at it. And certainly Alex is going to see what he can do to shake some things up and move some things around. But I don't think you're going to see any significant changes this offseason. TG Will says, with Fried possibly leaving in free agency, what's your thoughts on what the 5-man rotation looks like for next year? Kind of discussed this earlier, but I think it is going to be not Fried. I think it's going to be Sale, Lopez, Schwellenbach, Strider, obviously coming back, and then Ian Anderson would be my 5 internally, but I think they go out and get a veteran arm to put in the rotation. Joshua Root says, great podcast. As we all know, the offense on most nights is uninspiring. 2 questions. Who is the team's leader? Why is the fire passion missing from a lot of the time? Again, I'm touched on the second question here a little bit. It's hard to show that fire, and we've seen fire and passion. We've seen Matt Olson get frustrated when he's going through slumps. You saw Jorge Soler slam an iPad. Again, these guys are frustrated themselves. They know they're not playing. And Brian Sticker said, Matt Olson has said, others have said, we know we're not playing like we're capable of. And that's tough. And that's hard. And you're seeing them you're seeing that in the way that they are presenting themselves. So I think that fire passion is there. Who's the team's leader? That's the question everybody kind of asks. I think there's several leaders. I think Travis d'Arnaud, Ozzie Albies, Charlie Morton are certainly some leaders, but they're not loud leaders. They're not rah-rah leaders. They're not those types of leaders. They're guys that lead more by example, but I think those are your leaders on this team. William the Worst, fully healthy. Who is your top to bottom starting lineup for opening day 2025? Kind of talked about this earlier too. I think it's Sean Murphy, Matt Olson. I think you're going to see Ozzie Albies. I think you're going to see Austin Riley. I think Orlando Arce is going to be back. I really do. And I think it's going to be an outfield of Soler, Harris, and Acuna. Again, I don't think there's going to be much shakeup this offseason. So I think that is going to be your lineup. We'll probably see a move or two in there. But I think for the majority, that's going to be your lineup. And last one here, Josh Williams. Hey, Jake, everyday listener. Thank you for that. 2 questions. I don't follow the Mets. How are they unbeatable juggernauts all of a sudden? They've gotten some really good performances from some veteran pitchers like a Sean Manaea, Luis Severino. They've got an MVP talent playing out of his mind in Francisco Lindor, and they're just playing with a lot of confidence. That's a word I used a lot on yesterday's podcast. The Braves are not a confident baseball team right now, especially on the offensive side of things. And I watch that Mets team play. There is just a ton of confidence, including from Jesse Winker, who was a guy that I really wanted at the deadline. They're just showing a lot of confidence right now, and they're playing with a lot of confidence, and they just feel like they're going to win every single game. You'll have that feeling when you watch the Braves right now. So the Mets are certainly riding high, and they're feeding off of that, and the Braves just haven't been able to really get on that stretch this year. That will do this episode of the Locked On Braves. Thank you so much for submitting all your questions. Thank you for Wells, Protect PR, Lee Carter, Braves Thrills, Brogelsby in here, Jericho, William the Worst. Thank you all for joining me live. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button, please, if you haven't already. Hitting that thumbs up button does a ton of good for the podcast. So thank you so much to all who do that. Make sure you follow us on social media at shortstopball, at Locked On _Braves, and we will talk to you next time.